All right, ladies and gentlemen, my next special guest is Scott Ritter. You've seen him here before. He is a former U.S. Marine and a former weapons inspector. Is there a split that's happening for those that you've seen on your end? I've seen it on social media, but I mean, like in real life. Is there a split that's happening between those that did vote for Donald Trump because of his anti-war position that you've seen in real time? Like, he said that he was going to end the war with Russia, Ukraine day one. I thought it was a bit of adventurous, but day one, and then also that he would stop the genocide in Gaza or whatever. For the people, some people that did vote for him because they thought that he was going to put a stop to that. Do you feel that there is a split?
There's two things. One, on Russia, first of all, you have to understand that there's very few people in the United States, either Trump supporters or those who don't support Trump, who understand the complexity of Russia. Because of Russophobia, we're just as ignorant as the day is long. So when anybody on the Trump side said, we support, his plan about Russia, it wasn't because they have deep-seated knowledge of the reality of Russia and things like that. It's just that they bought into the Trump. I got to watch my language. I'm trying to be really careful what I say. The Trump BS about wanting to be a peacemaker. It was just a lie, another grift, another con, straight up. So there's a difference between those people and then on the Russia topic, and then on Gaza. First of all, nobody who knows anything about Gaza voted for Donald Trump because they just know that he's a liar. They just looked at everything. He can't. How could you vote for the Zionist crowd? I mean, I had to. When people would say, "Well, what about Gaza? What about Gaza? What about Gaza?" My response was, I am going to try and stop a nuclear war with Russia. And then if we live, maybe we can come up with a solution to Gaza. But I'm not putting Gaza ahead of stopping a nuclear war. But I knew he was never going to solve the Gaza problem because he aligned himself with people who are anti-solution to that. So I don't think there's a crowd of people who are pro-Palestinian who are going, I'm really disappointed in Donald Trump. He didn't live up to my expectations. I think they all went, no, we knew exactly who he was when he came in, and he's delivering on the one place that Donald Trump is delivering is on supporting Israel blindly, which he and his administration have done. So I think there's a difference between that. Another more complicated one was Iran, because on Iran, he sent mixed signals on Iran. And anybody who watched it would have known, and I was one of those, that you can't sit there and say, I want to have better relations with Iran. I want to have a better deal with Iran. And that all sounds good. I want Iran to be able to trade with people, but they can't have any enrichment. Like, well, wait a minute, there's a problem there. They're never going to agree to that. So, since you should know that, that means everything you're saying about wanting better relations, it's just a grift. It's just a lie. And that's the problem with Donald Trump. He's a liar about everything. He doesn't want better relations with Russia. What he wants with Russia is Russia to surrender to his will and compromise on Ukraine. You see, everything requires the other side to bend the knee. There's not a single Donald Trump political initiative that's reality-based, that says, oh, this is the reality that we have to deal with. He wants Hamas, who is kicking the living crap out of Israel as we speak. He wants Hamas to bend the knee and go away. That's not going to happen. He wants Iran, who just blew the crap out of Israel with their ballistic missiles for 12 days. He wants Iran to surrender, give up their nuclear program, give up their ballistic missiles, and go away. That's not going to happen. And he wants Russia, who is literally flattening Ukraine as we speak with 500, 600, 800 drones a night, plus some highly sophisticated missiles mixed into the mix. No Ukrainian air defense whatsoever to speak of. He wants Russia to basically forget why they went into Ukraine to begin with. I want to remind people is because of the nationalists and the assault on the ethnic Russians, the war against the Russian language, religion, culture, history, the ethnic genocide being committed against the Russians, Odessa, Mariupol, Azov, the Nazis, all of this. And Trump says he wants Russia, forget all that, bend to my will. I demand that you stop this war on terms that are acceptable to me, Donald J. Trump. And Russia's like, we're not going to do that. Donald Trump lives in a fantasy world where there is no reality. It's only, I am Donald Trump, and because I say I want this, it shall happen. And unfortunately, we have enough sycophants in the United States and around the world who play that game, just enough to make him feel like, oh, maybe if I do say it, it will happen. But the people that count, the powers out there, China, they didn't crack on trade. Russia, they didn't crack on Ukraine. Iran, they're not cracking on nuclear. Hamas, they ain't going to give up. These people will not bend the knee to Donald Trump, and he can't handle that. He can't handle that.
So when you say he wants Russia to compromise with you, what is the compromise?
Oh, he said straight up, he said Russia can't have territorial demands. See, Russia's saying Crimea is forever Russia. Now, there's some in the Trump administration, we might have to yield on that one. I'm sorry, you don't get a vote. I just want to remind every American in the audience there, we don't get a vote. You know, I don't care what you think or I think, or it doesn't matter. Russia has absorbed Crimea constitutionally. It's part of Mother Russia. It ain't going away. And Russia has absorbed Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk, the 4 Novorossiya territories, Donbass plus the two former Ukrainian territories. Russia has absorbed them. They belong to Russia. Russia will never yield. It's constitutionally part of Russia. It just isn't going to happen. And for Trump to come in after starting this war, I just want to remember Donald Trump started this war, and to tell Russia, no, you got to stop now. And, we may make it hard for Ukraine to become NATO. Russia's saying Ukraine will never be part of NATO. That won't happen. And we want them to yield on that. We want them to yield on the size of the military so that Ukraine can maintain 900,000 men trained by NATO as a fist poised to strike into Russia. Russia said, that ain't going to happen, 50,000. And the Nazis that we empowered in 2014, Russia says they got to go away. They can never again be politically viable in Ukraine. And we're like, no, we're going to. Russia has said they are fighting this war to address the root causes of the conflict so that never again do they have to deal with the threat that was manifested by Ukraine as it existed from 2014 to 2022. Russia will never again allow that happen. This means that this war will go on until Ukraine either conforms to Russia's demands or ceases to exist. That's the reality. And Donald Trump wants the Russians to pretend that no, they can peacefully coexist with this pro-Western Ukraine because Donald Trump has decided that he's going to invest in rare earth minerals in Ukraine. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Donnie. The Russians just took over the largest deposit of lithium in Ukraine. It's theirs. You ain't going to get it. And if we wait another couple months, Russia will also take over the rest of it up there in Dnipropetrovsk, and none of your rare earth minerals will be under the control of the Ukrainian government. All of them will be under control of Russia. They don't care about your agreement. See, Russia doesn't care. Russia only cares about that which pertains to Russia's legitimate national security concerns, which do not infringe on anything dealing with American national security. It just infringes on Donald Trump's oversized ego.
So Trump is just basically flip-flopping back and forth. When he met with Zelensky during that that public interview that we saw in the Oval Office, when he met with him during that time and he told him that he was running, he said, you don't have any cards left to play. I thought he said back then that Russia would have to get Crimea, that it would belong to Russia. But now he just keeps going back and forth. And then also, I think, aren't the people in the Donbass ethnically Russian?
So are the people in Zaporizhia, so are the people in Kherson. They are ethnic Russians, who have made a decision. I just want to remind people that the people that took over in the coup of February 2014, the Maidan Revolution, was a coup backed by the CIA that brought into power a Ukrainian nationalist identity linked to the ideology of Stepan Bandera. In the West, people have said, well, that's not a big deal. It's not. No, it's huge. Stepan Bandera is the national hero of Ukraine today. They have children camps throughout Ukraine where they wear Nazi uniforms and they perform Nazi salutes. This is happening right now. They just graduated a whole bunch of new more. Over 50% of the Ukrainian army wears swastikas and some sort of Nazi tattoos because they sing songs about Stepan Bandera is our father. This is our fatherland. Ukraine is a Nazi state. We can pretend it's not, but it's a Nazi state. This is the reality of Ukraine. These people came in and immediately declared war on ethnic Russians, whom they view as lesser humans, subhumans. They call them orcs, Moskuls. They call them all sorts of names. They have declared war against the Russian language. They outlawed it. How can you do that? Then they declared war against the Orthodox Church, ongoing, desecrating the oldest church in the Orthodox, in the Orthodox realm, in Kiev, desecrating it. They physically declared the Russians to be terrorists. In April of 2014, they initiated an anti-terrorist operation, ATO, against the Russians of the Donbass. And they singled them, they bombed civilians. They sent the army in arbitrarily. There's videotapes of Ukrainian soldiers walking down the streets, just firing into the apartment buildings of the Russians, laughing as they fire into them. They don't care. When we talk about the rape of Mariupol, it's literally the rape of Nanking. If you remember your history of World War II, when the Japanese went into the Chinese city of Nanking and the deprivations they showed, the Chinese beheading, raping, murdering. That's what the Azov Nazis did when they took over Mariupol in 2014. The physical rape and destruction of the ethnic Russians of Mariupol. They burned Russians alive in Odessa. They tried to physically take over Crimea, but they were stopped by Russian patriots who rose up and said, not one step further. Then the little green men showed up and Crimea became Russia. But the point is, the Ukrainians have been declaring war against the Russians of the Donbass, treating them as terrorists. And this is what people wrote. I could just guarantee you, every American in your audience, if you were subjected to this, if a power came in and treated you like this, you would rise up.
This is one
you would rise up and oppose this. I can guarantee it.
This is what I got it. Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah. I was just going to say, this is one I think a lot of people on the left got wrong in the beginning. I'm just being honest with you. And I think you may have seen it too. A lot of people, when this war first kicked off, a lot of people on the left were saying, we got to stand in solidarity with Ukraine, not knowing about the history of it, like what you're talking about. I think, a lot of people on the left got Gaza right, but we had already kind of known, more about that situation. But I think a lot of people with Ukraine and Russia, they just did not know the history of it.
Yeah, one of the problems is that, again, we have been subjected to Russophobic pressures from the government, from the media, from academia. There's no vector in American society that that normally is used to influence the American audience. In the universities of America, the pro-Palestinian cause is manifest. People, even though there's a strong pro-Israeli element in American universities, there's also a strong pro-Palestinian. So there is a dialogue taking place in academia. The media, even though it's heavily influenced by pro-Israeli elements, the media does and has treated this issue fairly on occasion. And the American population, is aware of the fact that there is a disparity between the Israeli narrative and the Palestinian narrative, wherever you stand on it. So it's not unthinkable to say maybe the Palestinians have a point. But on Russia, we had the whole Cold War presenting the Russians as the evil empire, the bad guys. And then when the Soviet Union collapsed, we immediately started treating Russia as a cartoon character. Remember that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where he was a Russian cop who had to come to America and help or whatever, but the Russians were alcoholics who drank and wrestled with bears and had thick accents and looked stupid and were just, we saw a Training Day. Denzel Washington's character gets off by the Russian mafia here in the United States because they're very bad and very dangerous. We can go on and on.
Or the guy from Rocky 4, or he tries to beat up Rocky, he kills Rocky's friend.
Yeah, he killed Apollo Creed. You can't kill Apollo Creed, but I will murder you. Whatever. This is the way the Russians are treated. And then what happened is, we controlled Boris Yeltsin for a decade while we literally economically raped their nation. It was so bad that the charge of the affairs of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, Mr. Mary, number 2, in 1994 wrote a memo called the New Long Telegram, sort of a play on George Kennan's Long Telegram of 1946 that set up the policy of containment and began the Cold War. He wrote a memorandum saying, hey, our support the potential of Russia to create democratic institutions. I want to say that one more time, because everybody says that Vladimir Putin is the guy who prevented this. No. We did it. America, by blindly supporting Boris Yeltsin, who put tanks in the street of Moscow in October 1993 to go to war against the Russian parliament. I don't know if people remember that. He fired on the parliament, killed parliamentarians, sent the army in there to hunt them down, burn them out, terminate Russian democracy. And we continued to support him, and we opposed any real democratic resistance to Yeltsin. And Mary said, we're literally destroying the potential of democracy in Russia. This is the reality. So when Putin took over and began to rebuild Russia, we didn't want that. And rather than understanding the context of it and respecting Russia for what it is, the reality of Russia, we began to paint Vladimir Putin in the darkest of terms. He is the KGB man. He is an autocrat, a dictator, the whole thing. So Americans today, when they think about Russia, the first thing they do, if I ask an American to describe Russia, I can guarantee you 8 out of 10 will come back with Putin. So when you have an entire nation of 150 million people defined in the persona of one person who we don't know. Nobody, you've probably seen Oliver Stone's interview with Vladimir Putin. Many people have. It's a very human interview, etc. It gets closer to the reality of the complexity of Putin. But no, our national security establishment is staffed exclusively with people who have written PhD thesis on Vladimir Putin being the brutal dictator that he is. He's not. But they have, in order to get into the club, you have to have that entree. You can't write something saying Vladimir Putin is the greatest thing that's happened to Russia, since Peter the Great. He is rebuilding and redefining Russia. Russians are falling in love with Russia. Russia is economically viable, politically stable, and not a threat to the world. Oh God, if you wrote a PhD thesis about that, you would never even get an invitation. In fact, you'd have the FBI kick down your door and come in and investigate you. So academia has produced a bunch of clones, anti-Putin clones, who are now in government, and then they have the revolving door with the media and academia, and they come back and they get on TV. How many former CIA officials do you see? You got the former CIA station chief. He doesn't like to talk about the fact that he was incompetent and got rolled, and his entire team got arrested and kicked out of Russia because he's stupid. But he now comes over and they say, "Well, Steve, you're a Russian expert." He's not really a Russian expert. He's just an idiot who can't spy. He's a bad spy. But now he's supposed to talk about all the insights that he has. His job is covert operations, information operations. His job is the black art of propaganda. His job is regime change. You really think that's the man that's going to come here and talk to you about Tchaikovsky, the culture of Russia, the history of the Orthodox Church in Russia, or speak about Russia in complimentary terms? No, but that's all they put on there. And so the American public is programmed to be ignorant as the day is long about Russia. That's the sad truth. At this moment in time, when the American public should be educated and informed, they're not. And I can't blame the left. It's an American problem. This isn't about right or left, because the right is just as ignorant too. The sad thing is, there's no country easier to understand today than Russia. It's accessible. You can visit it. They want you to visit it. They won't as long as you don't do something stupid like put drugs, bring drugs into the country, or or you got to respect the laws, and free. They don't have quite the same free speech we have, so you can't stand up on Red Square and go, Vladimir Putin sucks, donkey, whatever. You can't do that, but you can go to a cafe and have an honest to God discussion and debate with Russians. They will answer questions. You can ask questions. I get squeezed harder on Russian media than I do on anything in America. They ask tough questions. So it's not free speech in the American standpoint, but there is not a restricted flow to access the information that is necessary to know to understand the world we live. The Russians are highly educated, very knowledgeable about the complexities of their world and our world. And so there's no excuse for us not knowing about it, except the wall, the psychological wall that we've created that says they're bad. We have to stay away from them.
Scott, this question here, someone brought this up a couple nights ago, and it's back up again. Can you ask about the Russian scientists in Iran? Are you familiar with
the Russian scientist? I mean, is there I mean, there's Russian scientists in Iran, but this is the Russian scientist. So I don't know. I will say that Russia has several hundred technicians working in the Iranian nuclear program, the Bushehr reactor. Russia completed that reactor, built that reactor, and brought it up to speed. And so the Russians are there to make sure the reactor operates safely and things of that nature. Russia has technical relations with Iran on some military aspects. But I mean, the Russian scientist, I don't know who the Russian scientist is. I need to know more in order to be able to tackle that one.
I want to pivot to this is a really big story. I'm sure you've heard of Francesca Albanese. She's the UN rapporteur. For those who are not aware, the U.S. government is sanctioning Francesca Albanese, who we say I think should be getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
100%.
Exactly. Marco Rubio let the cat out the bag the other day. Today, I am imposing sanctions on UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese for her illegitimate and shameful efforts to prompt the ICC, action against the U.S. and Israeli officials, companies, and executives. Albanese's campaign of political and economic warfare against the U.S. and Israel will no longer be tolerated. We will always stand by our partners in their right to self-defense. The U.S. will continue to take whatever actions we deem necessary to respond to lawfare and protect our sovereignty and that of our allies. So again, for those who are not aware, Francesca, again, she should be the one receiving the Peace Prize. And I want to mention this from Chuck Modi, just as a reminder to everybody, your friendly reminder that this fascist, tyrannical, war criminal speaks for the entirety of the U.S. Senate. See, people forget this. Everybody voted to confirm Marco Rubio as Secretary of State in the Senate, including Bernie Sanders. And I remember I called this out when it happened. So a lot of this stuff that you're seeing taking place with foreign policy that Marco Rubio, is a part of. Also, he was a part of the attempted deportation of the Columbia student who was a part of the protest. That was Marco Rubio. But to this point, this is absolutely insane. I mean, Francesca is getting in trouble for doing her job.
Well, not just for telling the truth. I mean, that's the thing. She's not an irresponsible person. In fact, if you know anything about the UN, and I worked there for a number of years, she is conditioned not to seek controversy. She's conditioned to find the middle ground. She's conditioned. This is her approach. And oftentimes that leads to people saying that the United Nations is weak and ineffective because they take such a neutral position. And she's somebody who, came up through the system. But the situation in Gaza is such that there can be no neutrality. I mean, it's at the point now where you have to call it out for what it is. There's no softening of the position. And this is a reality that's been manifested around the world as people recognize. I mean, it's funny that Rubio is singling out the International Criminal Court, but what about the International Court of Justice? I'd probably have to dig a little bit deeper, but since she's a UN official, I don't think she pays as much attention to the ICC as she does to the ICJ, which is actually the court that is derived from the powers of the United Nations Charter. But it wouldn't be the first time that Rubio, showed his ignorance. But I have to be careful because maybe she is, somehow attached herself to the ICC's jurisdiction on this. But she is just saying this is genocide. What's happening? It's genocide. There's no other way of putting, what I would ask people to do is take the time to go and research the history of the Warsaw Ghetto. The Warsaw Ghetto, Warsaw was the capital of Poland. And what the Germans did in the ghettos, the first thing they did is they took the Jews of Warsaw and they consolidated them into a single area, concentrated them. And then they began to transport them out. And then they began the destruction of the ghetto. Literally, everything that was done to the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto is being done to the Gazans of the Palestinians of Gaza. It's the same thing on a scale that's even greater. This is literal genocide. It meets every word. The Israelis themselves can't even defend this anymore. They will say, no, it's not genocide, but they admit, they have their soldiers are saying it's a free fire zone. We go in there and we're allowed to kill everybody. Everybody. We do without any consequence. None. There is a battalion, the 97th Battalion, and it's a religious affiliated battalion. It was created so that there was a vehicle for a particular brand of Orthodox Jew could join the IDF and still be able to, maintain their religious cultures. But it was hijacked by what they call the settlers on the hill, the Brooklyn Jews, these fanatics who come in from the United States and steal people's homes and all this. They came in and hijacked this. They had to be moved out of Palestine and sent to the Golan Heights because even the Israelis said these guys are just raping and murdering and killing, and it's out of control. But then they've taken them and they've brought them back to Gaza and they celebrate their activities. Now, this most recent ambush of Israeli forces hit the 97th pretty hard. It's a brutal but wonderful example of karma, if you ask me. I'm not supposed to promote violence, but the people who committed some of the most outrageous atrocities against the Palestinian people over the years were brought to justice by Hamas. But we have Americans there right now. Americans are there as contractors who are killing Palestinians with no consequence on videotape. They're bragging about it. This should be, the FBI should be seizing these videotapes and arresting these people, and they should be charged with murder and war crimes. But no, they're going to be given medals and paychecks, and because the Palestinians don't matter. This is what Ms. Albanese was talking about. This is what she's been trying to bring attention to. And now she's labeled, a practitioner of lawfare against the United States. Freedom of speech means something. Freedom of speech means you're free to speak. And if the United States is concerned about her words, then our response should be to put out better words. If we don't agree with what she's saying, then we need to say it better and win over the hearts and minds of people. But we can't because she's right. And so the only choice we have now is sanctioning, bullying, using the power of the United States to suppress and oppress. She deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. And if she doesn't get it this year, then the Nobel Committee should just disband.
Yeah, I saw she was on Democracy Now. For those who, I think that's the first interview she's probably done since this announcement was made. But just to show you guys how ridiculous this is, and shout out to the person who made this comparison, Trita Parsi. The man below is the founder of Al Qaeda in Syria. The U.S. just took his organization off its terror list and lifted sanctions on him. The woman below is the UN rapporteur of Israel on Israel and Palestine. The U.S. is about to impose sanctions on her. Let that sink in. So the guy on the left, that's Jelani, who they apparently put in a suit and gave him a haircut. And now the U.S. patting him on the back in Syria. He's leading regime change there. And then you have Francesca here. Like, it's just, I feel like I'm living in an episode of The Twilight Zone. This is absolutely insane. And some people are asking, like, well, how can you sanction an individual?
Well, I mean, I'd have to see what the sanctions are. There can be travel bans. There can be secondary sanctions imposed on people who support her. I'd have to see specifically what the sanctions are, but I would imagine that one of them is that she will be denied the ability to enter the United States. I don't know that, but I'm just saying that this is Marco Rubio. Maybe that's something that he could do, but financial penalties for people who support her financially. I mean, there's just a variety of tools available to that. We sanctioned individuals all the time. If you take a look at the sanctions list that we put out against the Russians, it's not just companies, but we target individuals as well. So, I mean, one of the things that they can do is by sanctioning her, for instance, if she were to create a charity to raise money for, helping the children of murdered Palestinians, because she's a sanctioned individual, anybody who contributed to her charity could be, criminally charged, things like that.
This is crazy.
Yeah, no, it's insane. Welcome to America. I mean, we've stopped being anything that remotely resembles what the founding fathers wanted us to be. We're not the purveyor of liberty and justice for all. We're not about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We are literally a terrorist organization that bullies people, murders people, promotes genocide, and then we do it in Orwellian fashion, where we just use double speak to disguise the crimes that we commit.
Yeah, and I wonder about this as well. I mean, if you guys think about the optics, they invited Netanyahu in and had dinner with him, but they sanctioned Francesca.
Yeah. Yeah, but they didn't just invite him. He showed up with a suitcase full of his dirty laundry, and he makes the Department of State clean and fold his dirty laundry. It's something that the United States State Department has always created a service. So let's say I'm a diplomat who comes over to meet with the president or secretary of state. While I'm here, my laundry will be cleaned, because you don't want to send your laundry out for security reasons and all this stuff to get dry clean. So the U.S. government will take and clean the laundry, and that's okay. That's legitimate. But what Netanyahu and his wife do is they bring in suitcases of their dirty laundry just to humiliate us. It's a pure alpha dog maneuver. Yes, America, we're letting the Prime Minister of Israel piss on us, literally, by bringing in his dirty laundry so that it can be cleaned by Americans to show that he is superior to us. This is what's going on. This man is a disgusting human being, the head of a criminal genocidal state, who doesn't like us. I remind people, he and the Israeli Mossad, they were the spy masters of Jonathan Pollard, who in the 1980s stole the greatest secrets of the United States of America. The code book with all the codes that we had broken. It cost us billions of dollars to do that. The American strategic plan to go to war against the Soviet Union if we were attacked by their missiles. He stole all this on the orders of the Israeli government, who received this information. And because they're the good friends of the United States, they turned around and gave it to the KGB. This is during the Cold War. They gave it to the KGB to get better immigration rights for Jews who wanted to leave the Soviet Union. When Pollard showed up in Israel, Netanyahu greeted him, and he said, you know, our job is to squeeze everything we can out of the United States and then let the wind blow them away. That's the man that Donald Trump just invited into the White House. We're cleaning his dirty laundry, and we're just bending over to give him everything he wants. He's not a friend of the United States. He's an enemy of the United States. But for whatever reason, we've bought into the fiction that somehow Israel's the greatest thing since sliced bread when it comes to promoting American values. No, Israel's the exact opposite of anything America ever stood for.
Yeah, it makes me, it honestly like makes me cringe, like honestly. And I have to think about the timeline here. One more question for you, Scott. When I look at the timeline, how long is this conflict with Russia and Ukraine supposed to continue? I can't even believe it's gone on as long as it has. And then also with Israel and Gaza. Does Israel and Gaza even get resolved under this presidency? Because Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu were talking about, we found a couple of countries to take them in. So they're talking about ethnically cleansing the land. They're
talking about emptying the Warsaw Ghetto is what they're talking about. Let's just call it what it is. Let's not pretend it's anything other than a Nazi-like elimination of a targeted population. That's what they're talking about. The bad news for Trump and Netanyahu is there's this organization called Hamas, and they're not losing. And they're just going to continue to fight. So this will go on for as long as Hamas can continue to resist. And Hamas has shown the ability to resist in sustained fashion. I mean, they're increasing the scope and scale of their resistance. So we'll see. I would even speculate that Hamas may be planning another October 7th type attack into Israel, not on that same scope, but just to send a message to Israel that you don't get to only come on to Gaza and fight, that we're going to take the fight to Israel, because this most recent ambush took place very close to the border between Gaza and Israel. So Hamas, instead of being driven into the center, is starting to expand its operations out. So I wouldn't be surprised if someday we wake up to find out Hamas took over another kibbutz just to send a signal to Israel that, you don't get this. This fight isn't determined by you; it's determined by us. Russia. This is a conflict of existential proportions for Russia. Literally, a conflict that their survival as a modern nation state depends on the outcome. Russia can't afford to lose. Therefore, this war will continue until Russia wins. And Russia has made it clear that there's no calendar attached to this. The negotiator Medinsky said in Istanbul, the last round of negotiation with the Ukrainians, that it took Russia 21 years to defeat the Swedes. And they're ready to do that now. They said if this war could go on for another 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, whatever it takes, Russia will not stop until Russia achieves the outcome that Russia demands that must be achieved. So Russia will outlast Trump. They will outlast anybody in the European Union. They'll outlast Zelensky. And sadly, they'll outlast another million Ukrainians if that's what's needed. Ukraine's losing this war. I don't know why people don't quite understand that. Just because Russia's not getting the big arrows on the map, Russia's fighting a different war. To give you an example, 2 weeks ago, I think the casualty figure for the Russians was 156 dead in a week. Now, just so Americans understand, in the Vietnam War, when we started bringing home 200 American boys in body bags a week in Vietnam, it broke the back of America. So we're not talking about an insignificant number of casualties here. 156 dead a week is a heavy load. The Ukrainians in that same week lost 1,500 and some odd people dead. All right, so we're literally talking about, orders of, that's an unsustainable, kill ratio. For every Russian that dies, 10 Ukrainians die. And these are the numbers the Russians don't add into their calculations for instance, the strikes that are taking place on a daily basis on the concentration of Ukrainian forces in the rear. The Russians don't know how many they kill. They drop bombs on a barracks, it collapsed the barracks. They don't know, so those numbers don't get counted. So the fact is the Ukrainian numbers are probably, several times higher than this, but 10 to 1 loss ratio. And Russia every month is bringing in 40,000 new troops. Now, if they lose 100, let's say they lose 200 guys a week, all right? So in a month, we're talking about losing 800 guys. Now, let's say it's a 3-to-1 wound ratio, so 8, 16, 24. Russia in a month is losing 3,200 guys, dead and wounded. They're recruiting 40,000. Now, I'm just a simple Marine, and math is not my forte. But even I know that if you're losing 3,200 and you're bringing in 40,000, you ain't getting weaker, you're getting stronger. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, are losing 1,500 guys a week. So we add that up, and they're losing more than they bring in. So Ukraine's getting weaker, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse for them. And another example, just to show how this happens on the battlefield. As Russia is moving in towards, there's a city called Pokrovsk, and there's a lot of fighting going around Pokrovsk right now. It's sort of an important hub, communications, logistics hub. If it falls, it puts the Ukrainians in a bad posture. So the Ukrainians, in order to reinforce, they had to pull people out of the line. And they pulled them out of a relatively quiet part of the line in Zaporizhia. And they withdrew a couple of brigades to send them up to Pokrovsk. It didn't work. They got bombed. They got killed. They didn't even make it. They're dead and all that. But when they pulled it out, the Russians were ready, because the Russians went, oh, guess where we're going to attack next? Right where you took the troops out. And now they're advancing there. And this is what's happening to Ukrainians. Every time because they lost all their reserves in Kursk. They went into Kursk last August, put 76,000 troops in there, and they're all gone, dead, finished. There's nobody else. There's no reserves left. So now what they have to do is they have to rob Peter to pay Paul. They have to pull people off a front here to reinforce a Russian success here. And as soon as they pull them off, because the Russians have overwhelming manpower superiority, the Russians begin to attack here. Now the Ukrainians go, so now they have to move people here to here, then the Russians attack. The Russians are putting pressure on the entire front. And this will go on for as long as necessary. And it won't stop until either Ukraine surrenders or there isn't a Ukraine left.
This is what they mean when they say till the last Ukrainian. They'll fight till the last Ukrainian.
Savvy, I wrote an article in June of 2023, so we're coming up on 2 years, in my Substack. Finally, the Bull Charged is the name of the article. I would invite you and your audience to read it. I'll send you a link if you'd like, because I make that point there, that all this talk about supporting the summer offensive and all this stuff, the counter, because you remember in June, we're all talking about the great Ukrainian summer counteroffensive that's going to win the war and all that. It was always a joke. It's always been about sacrificing Ukrainians. And we cheer the loudest when the Ukrainians, like a bull going into the bullfighting ring, they cheer for all the people. The bull's going to die. You're cheering literally for the death of the bull. And this is what we've been doing for so long. We are cheering this blood sport. Ukraine has become a blood sport. If there's one kind of life in the world today that has less value than a Palestinian life, it's the Ukrainian lives. We claim to care about them. People say we care about Ukraine. People put the flag up there. But we're responsible for the deaths of more than 1 million Ukrainians. 1 million. And it's our fault. Our fault. And now it's just going to continue to happen and go on. And then what's going to happen is that the Ukrainians will become, again, the equivalent of the people get mad at me when I say this, but I said early on that what's going to happen to the United States is we're going to become so numb about the atrocities committed against the Palestinians that it's just going to blend itself into something where we stop being disturbed by it. There was a time if the Israelis dropped a bomb on a camp and there was a man or a boy trapped inside, burning to death, and we watched that. We were upset about it. There's a time if we had an audio tape of Hind Rajab begging to be rescued by the Red Crescent, and then she was murdered by Israeli gunfire, that we were upset about it. Every day, 147, 150, 220 Palestinians are murdered by the Israelis and the Americans in Gaza. People who are simply trying to get water for the children who don't have clean water, trying to get food for their starving family. That's their only crime. And they're being murdered to prove a point, to establish a presence. And that they're dropping bombs on schools. They're dropping bombs on hospitals. It happens every day. And Americans wake up, and instead of crying, throwing up, the normal things you would do when confronted with atrocities this level, we just move on because we're numb to it now. The Israelis have succeeded in turning mass murder into a mind-numbing exercise to the extent that because we can't absorb the pain anymore, we collectively just move past it. Fortunately, there are people like Francesca out there who continue to hold the moral compass up there and shine a light on this. But it's really disturbing how accustomed we've become to large numbers of dead Palestinians. And the same thing's happening in Ukraine. We've just become accustomed to large numbers of dead Ukrainians, and all the people out there that claim to be supporting Ukraine, they don't. We're not the friends of the Ukrainians. We have never been the friends of Ukrainians. People who claim to be the friends of Ukrainians don't know anything about Ukraine. We simply like Ukraine because they're against Putin. They're against Russia. But we don't like them enough to say, hey, maybe we should stop the killing. And we're just going to allow even Trump to show you the hypocrisy of this fat orange-faced madman. He claims he wants to stop the killing. So his solution is to give more weapons of death to Ukrainians, knowing that they're not going to change the outcome of this war. All it's going to do is require a more intense response by the Russians that will kill even more Ukrainians.
And to let everybody know as well, one of the things that Francesca Albanese stated is she named 60 companies that are directly profiting off of the genocide in Gaza. And it's not what you would think. Like, we all know, of course, like we talked about before, Palantir, we know about, the MIC, that type of stuff. No, I'm talking about tech companies. I'm talking about Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT here. Like, it's not all MIC, like it's companies that you wouldn't think of. And I just find it interesting that once she put that report out, now here come the sanctions.
Oh yeah, because that's Israel's Achilles heel, is the economy. If you crush Israel, why do you think we bomb the Houthi? We bomb the Houthi because they succeeded in shutting down Israel's second largest port, bankrupting it. That's why we bombed them. And they're doing it again now. They're sinking ships. They're strangling that. The Iranians struck Haifa, the largest port, destroyed the port facilities, destroyed oil facilities. Israel's in a lot of trouble economically. And what we can't allow, we being the United States government, is any notion of a boycott. Because the moment you're able to successfully boycott companies that do business with it, Israel's over. It's finished. It's finished. It's gone. You want the quickest victory in the world? Don't wait for a BDS boycott or the divestment sanction movement to tell you what to do. Research your own. And if every American woke up in the morning and said, I just refused, you don't have to announce it. Just do it. I refuse to buy from this company. I refuse. You don't have to make an announcement because you don't want ICE and the FBI coming after you. Just do it. And it will destroy Israel overnight. 100% destroy them overnight, because they can't survive without this injection of capital that comes from these companies that you speak of, from the American tax. Ted Cruz just talked about pushing a bill for $240 billion, $240 billion, that's with a B, dollars to Israel. Now, the last time I checked, was the senator from the state of Texas that just got slammed by a flood. And we still have people in North Carolina that have been slammed by floods. New Mexico is getting slammed by floods. People in Maui still are recovering from the fire. We have American infrastructure problems. And this America First senator wants to send $240 billion to Israel. That's the crux of the problem here, that people are willing to sacrifice America for the benefit of this postage stamp sized nation that's practicing genocide and doesn't stand for anything that is reflective of American values. Israel doesn't have a constitution. Israel, so you can't, it's not a republic. They don't respect the rule of law. They don't respect international law. Their military is mass murderers. They are committing genocide. They don't believe in free speech. We can just go on and on and on. And they don't like us. That's the other thing I just want to remind everybody about. They don't like us. They disrespect us. They're not pro-America. They're anti-America. USS Liberty, Jonathan Pollard, the theft of American nuclear material, the disgrace, the way they debased American Marines in Beirut. We can go on and on. Barack Obama's White House was totally saturated with Israeli listening devices, spying on the President of the United States. So was Donald Trump's White House the first term around. So was Joe Biden's White House. The Israelis spy on America more than any other nation in the world. And we give them all of our technology. They still go to steal the ones that we don't give them. It's the biggest threat to the national security of the United States. And yet Ted Cruz wants to send them $240 billion. Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, who should be protecting us from Israel, says that his number one priority, this is the director of the FBI, is the security of Israel, not America, Israel. Dan Bongino, big loudmouth dude on, I'm so America, I'm so pro-America. My highest priority is the security of Israel. It's almost like these people are all Manchurian candidates. If you remember the Manchurian Candidate, the movie, I forget the name of the guy, Dan Parcell is the kindest, sweetest, most kindest gentleman in the entire world. That's what they were programmed to say. And like once you become in the U.S. government, they flip over the Queen of Spades or the Queen of Diamonds or Queen of Hearts, and Israel is the greatest nation in the world, and we must do everything we can to secure Israel. No. Israel is the worst thing that ever happened to America. It's destroying America. They've taken over America. They've debased America. Every American has the blood of Palestinians on their hands because of the state of Israel. Every American, me included, you included, we all collectively have the blood of Palestinians on our hands because at one point or another, we didn't do enough, or we were silent when we should have spoken out. Whatever. We have disgraced ourselves because of the state of Israel. And we have to be careful now because they've weaponized American speech. We'll be called, I don't know about you, I'll be called an anti-Semite for what I said here tonight. And that's like being called a racist. It's like, oh, you're a bad person, you're an anti-Semite. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm just anti-genocide. I'm anti-nations that are opposed to the fundamental values that are supposed to define the United States. I'm against nations that openly advocate against the United States. That's Israel. They openly do it. They buy the U.S. Congress. Hey, Sabby, I got a good idea. Let's create a political action committee. We're going to call it the American Russia Public Affairs Committee. And we're going to go to Russia. We're going to go to Russia and we're going to meet with Russian oligarchs and we're going to get them to give us billions of dollars. And then we're going to come back here and we're going to say, I want to spend $100 million to buy Congress on behalf of the American Russia Political Affairs Committee. You don't think there would be any problems with that, do you? You don't think the FBI might get a little worried about that. And yet that's exactly what happens with the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee. They brag about spending $100 million to buy the United States Congress for the state of Israel. And there's no problem for this. I mean, come on now.
Crazy stuff. Scott Ritter, thank you so much for your time. Anything you got coming up that you want to announce?
Well, I mean, I've got a new book out, Highway to Hell, the Armageddon Chronicles. It talks about the danger of nuclear war. And I've got a Project 38, that's designed to promote disarmament policy by bringing attention to the 38 minutes of terror felt by the citizens of Hawaii on January 13th, 2018, when they received that text message on their phone about a missile inbound. Take shelter immediately. It's not a drill. And they thought they were going to die. And for 38 minutes, they were crying, calling their loved ones and all that. And so I'm making a documentary film called 38 Minutes that's trying to capture that, so I can challenge the American public and say, if the missile was coming in and you knew you were going to die, if you were given the power to go back 6 months and do whatever was necessary to stop that missile from flying, what would you do? And then I asked the question, why aren't you doing it now? And what I'm trying to do is get the American people to wake up to the absolute danger of nuclear, and made even more so by what we started talking about, by this orange-faced man-child in there saying that he threatened Vladimir Putin to bomb the you-know-what out of Moscow. That dangerous mindset. So 38 Minutes, Project 38 is something that I'm pushing. So if people want to support that, you can go to my Substack and donate. Buy the book. Every author who writes a book would like people to read the book, but we'd also like people to buy the book, because as a writer, that's how you earn money. But so the new book, the project, and my Substack, yeah.
All right. Okay, Scott, thank you so much for your time. Hey guys, this was a savvy clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.